In today's bonus episode, join us as real estate heavyweights have a chance to go some extra rounds into this week's topic. Hey everyone, I'm here with Ken Rosengren. Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Hey, and he's with Lacido Global at KW, serving Portland, Oregon, and Washington State. And Ken and I were having a conversation on why he doesn't attend the closings. And I feel like everybody else attends them. So what's up with you, Ken?
So as a licensed real estate agent, I am not a licensed loan officer. Mm-hmm. And when you go to your closing in Oregon and Washington, when you go to your closing, the only thing you're doing is you're signing your loan documents. Mm-hmm. There's some transfer paperwork from title, but everything is done. So it's really not about the real estate side. And what the reason, the 100% the reason why I don't do it is because several years ago, I've been in real estate for 13 years. So 13 years ago, I went to a closing and the numbers weren't right. Now, I know RESPA has been in place and everything else, so that kind of changes things, but it's just a habit now. So years ago, we didn't have RESPA. So I'm sitting at the closing table. The client says the numbers aren't right. Oh. So the fix-it guy I am, so I'm an aggressive real estate agent and I'm a guy. Guys like to fix things and get things done, just like a lot of women do too. It's a guy thing, too. So I'm sitting there with my client and we're trying to figure out what we need to do to fix this. Well, I didn't get in trouble, but I almost got in trouble because here I am as a real estate agent acting as a loan officer, trying to fix the loan documents. And I was talking to my attorney about this, and he basically told me I am not allowed to go to closings anymore because that would put me in a very huge liability issue. So he told me, yeah, true. It's the truth. So since then, I don't go. Now, I know a lot of agents are going to say, oh, that's the wrong thing. You have to go. You got to make sure your client's protected. My process, the client's already protected. We're done. We're past the appraisal. There's nothing else that can be done with the exception of canceling the contract because the financing's not right.
Right.
So because my attorney told me that and any other issues that would pop up, I would always try to fix it because that's who I am and that's what I do. And that's what I teach my team. And that's what it is. So I don't go to my closings. Now, how do I handle that with my clients? Right. When I work with a buyer, we do a buyer consultation. It takes anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And we sit down and we go through everything in the process of buying a home. And I teach home buying classes here in the state of Washington. I'm approved through the state. And I cover this all the time. I'm like, if you work with me, I will not be at your closing, but I will be there to hand you your keys. And I explain why. And the loan officers I work with, they're always at the closings anyway. Because so my client,
It's their side of things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, everything we've done is done after the appraisal's been, once we're at value on the appraisal. As a real estate agent, my job is really done. And I explain that to my clients in the buyer consultation, and nobody has an issue. I've never had a client in over 13 years get mad at me because I wasn't there.
Do you guys do, at the closings is usually if you're representing the buyer, are the seller and their agent there, or is it only the buyer, the lender, and the title?
In our area, it's just they're separated. They're not at one table doing everything. In our area, in Oregon and Washington, or Southwest Washington and Portland Metro, it's separate. So the buyer goes in at one time, the seller goes in at a different time. They're hardly ever do they ever meet. In fact, usually the seller is done maybe a day or so beforehand. But with the buyer, the buyer and seller usually never meet at title. So and it's just their loan stuff. It's just the transfer and their loan.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the key exchange happens when?
Key exchange doesn't happen until we have recording numbers. So once it's done at title in our area, it goes to the county for recording. Once we get those recording numbers, that's when we can give the key. That could happen as much as 72 hours later.
Oh, wow.
In our area.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, typically it happens the same day. Don't get me wrong. Typically it happens the same day.
Okay.
Okay. But if they don't close until 5 o'clock on a Friday and the wire transfer didn't happen like it was supposed to happen on time for them to process it, send it over to the county for the second run in the afternoon, then it doesn't get recorded with the county. So 72 hours later on Monday is when it gets recorded.
Do you guys have a
or
lot of
holiday.
people doing like pre-occupancy in situations like that where the sellers will allow the buyers to move, or they're just like, it's not your house yet?
Typically not. Very seldom in our area do we do pre-occupancy. Once in a while. I mean, I've done several over the years. I think we've done 3 or 4 this year,
Okay.
but it's very uncommon for pre-occupancy for a buyer.
And I think, I mean, you saw that Facebook chat. It got pretty heated. I mean, people were saying like, if you don't go, you shouldn't be a real estate agent. Like a couple people said that, which I think the miscommunication is how business is done in different parts of the country. Because like for you, the way that you're describing everything taking place, like that is passes all of the logic tests. But like in Ohio, where I do business, they are still doing roundtable closings. So the buyer and the seller, the agent, the lender, it's like everybody's there watching the buyer sign all the paperwork. It's insanity. And they exchange keys and they get occupancy at closing most of the time. So like usually the moving truck is like outside. It's crazy.
Yeah, not here.
I like
typically possession happens the same day.
Okay.
Either 5 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, depending on how the contract is written.
Makes sense.
However, with that being said, we can't hand keys until it's been recorded at the county and we have those recording numbers, and then based following the contract. So there are times that, the contract will say 5 o'clock is when we can hand keys over, but maybe it's a vacant house or something. Now they've moved out a couple of days early, and the seller and the listing agent say, yeah, go ahead, you guys, and we get that in an email. But typically the possession's not until that recording number, and typically not until 5 o'clock or 9 o'clock that evening.
Interesting. That's cool. Well, I appreciate you backing me up because I felt like I was losing that battle. So thank you, Ken.
Yeah, no problem. And you're right. I mean, everybody's used to what their area does. And they just, when you're talking East Coast versus West Coast, you're talking attorneys versus title officers, so there's so much difference that goes on. Yeah. So no problem. I'll back you up all day long on that one. I don't go to closings. Haven't for 13 years.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Hello. And today I'm talking to Cheryl Huff. Hey, Cheryl.
How are you doing?
Super. And Cheryl's with Comey and Shepherd, and she serves Greater Cincinnati. So Cheryl, we were talking about, do you attend the closings? Why or why not?
I absolutely attend the closings.
Oh, no, you're on Monica's side, Cheryl. Talk to me.
I look at it. I'm a previous runner, and I used to do marathons, and I look at it like I take them all the way to the finish line. It makes no sense to dart off at the end of the race and not cross that line. It's a celebratory thing.
Do you think that, Monica and I got in a big fight about this. Do you
that's never good.
It's okay. I mean, if you don't fight about things, how can you grow,
Yeah.
So do you think if we didn't, because it's customary in Ohio to do roundtable closings.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that if it was customary for just like sellers and buyers to go into the title company whenever they want, that you would still attend?
I've done both, but I would still attend with whoever my client was.
Mm-hmm.
I've had closings with out-of-state title companies, everything from the buyer just clicks to sign and there's, no official anything. Last week, I had a very unique transaction that I haven't encountered this in 20 years, and it kind of upset me.
Oh, what happened?
I had a client that I had just sold her a house, and then she referred me to her mother who was going to move in with her. So I sold her house. And the closing was set up. It was an out-of-state buyer, so they signed separately. So we had it set up to close just with my buyer at my office.
Okay.
And the buyer's daughter was unable to bring her. So I said, no problem. I'll go pick her up and bring her. And so I went and picked her up and brought her to my office. And she's like, "Are we supposed to be meeting someone else?" I said, "Yeah, the notary's supposed to be here and you're going to sign the papers, etc." And she's like, "I already did that."
Oh,
My jaw just dropped. I'm like, "What?" Apparently, the notary contacted her directly, set up to come 3 hours earlier to her house and sign the documents because she had a parent-teacher meeting at the time of our closing. So
oh.
no one notified me. I had no idea what documents she had signed. So then it turns into okay, I want to protect my client, so that's why I want to be at closing.
Oh my gosh, that's kind of crazy. I mean, that's more of a communication issue too. Do
Sure.
you, so who do you like? The title company's like a neutral third party, right?
Right.
And it was your buyer, but do you think about the lender should be the one that goes over the documents?
I've had it go both ways. I've had the lenders go over things, and then I've also had buyers contact me if they have questions.
Right, because they like know and trust you, and maybe that lender hasn't like really built the relationship for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know. I think most people feel the way that you do. I mean, this got pretty heated on Facebook. I didn't realize it was such a heated.
Is this the toe-to-toe part?
Yeah. I didn't realize it was so heated. Like a lot of people are exactly what you're saying. Like it is the finish line. Like if there's questions, but in my head, I think, well, gosh, I mean, if it's a buyer, most of the questions are going to be lender questions, and I'm not the lender.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a question on the numbers, like the title company should have sent that ahead of time, and like
Which sometimes doesn't happen.
no, it doesn't. It's annoying.
Yes.
Gosh. Well, that's really awesome. I appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts.
Sure.
Hey everyone, I'm here with Blair Ballin. Hi Blair.
Hey, Jennifer, how are you?
Great. And he's with Conway Real Estate serving Phoenix, Arizona. So I appreciate you being on here with me today, Blair.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we had gotten a lot of responses in our question about should you attend the closings or not. And you and I were having a conversation that you kind of see it both ways. So what are your thoughts? Like, why would you attend? Why wouldn't you attend?
So I really don't, with both closings and inspections, I see zero need to be there.
Okay.
I think it's actually doing the client a disservice by being there, and actually showing that we're less professional by being there. So regardless if you're an agent or a team or whatever, or have a team or on a team or whatever, and no matter how busy you are, the vendors, they should be qualified enough to be doing the job that they've been hired to do or getting paid to do. So then for us to be there, in my opinion, just gets in the way of what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And if we've already done our job, then everything else is already taken care of. So then when I've analyzed this before, then let's say in the case of closing, the only point of really being there, probably from what I've heard from most agents, is to get referrals. Well, then that's self-serving and that doesn't really serve the public. And in my opinion, that's just bogus because then you're really not there to help the client. You're just there to get a referral.
Oh, we're going to get some heat for this, Blair.
I'm used to it. I don't care. Then you should already be getting a referral if you've done a good job or not. So it's irrelevant to be there. And if you're there at the inspection or closing, I feel I'm not a broker, but from a brokerage standpoint, if anything were to ever go wrong and the client were to come back at you, that you open the doors for you to potentially be sued or involved with mediation or whatever, because now you're part of that exact process. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Realtor or Mr. Realtor or Mrs. Realtor, why didn't you review the settlement statement more? You were there. You had a chance to look at it. Or Mrs. Agent, you were at the inspection. The inspector went over this. You didn't ask for it in the inspection. You were there. Why didn't you do it? So I think it's a horrible business practice to attend anything.
I like your thought process on that because I happen to agree with you. So I feel like Monica got knocked out on this, even though on Facebook, you and I got knocked out. But I think I like your perspective of collapsing the inspection and the closing together, because you're right. Like the seller has hired, or the buyer, your client, has hired the professional to take care of those things. And we did our part and what we were hired for, which is find a ready, willing, and able buyer. And then that's kind of it. What do you say, or what are your thoughts around the agents that feel like they have to handhold these clients and kind of like get in the middle of every part of the process, because they feel like they're helping the client? And I know you alluded to like, you really, if it's only self-serving, but I think they would disagree with you. I don't think that they would think it's self-serving.
Right. So, I mean, my opinion is, so we show up at an inspection. I know this, we were talking about closings here, but I think inspections are generally part of the same type of process or system. Is that as a successful realtor, we should be setting up the systems and processes in place. So let's say in the case of me, and I'm not saying my system or process is perfect, but this is what I do.
Right.
And I believe my clients are very well served by it, is before the inspection, we have a discussion. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, this is what's going to happen. I'm not going to be at the inspection. If there's any questions, I've used these inspectors before. I know how to get a hold of them. And then we can talk with them after if there's any questions. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you're going to be going to the title company or attorney to sign the final paperwork. We've reviewed the settlement statements. Everything has been lined up. Everything is good to go.
Mhm.
We'll get together after that for exchange of fees or whatever.
Okay.
If everything is already in place and lined up, there's zero need for us to be there. So the hand holding is really just a lack of self-confidence on the realtor's part that they haven't done the right job for their client prior to that, because there's just no need to be there.
Interesting. Yeah, I think you're right. I also think sometimes many agents feel like they need to like earn their commission outside of what we've been hired to do. And that's like part of that. Do you,
Totally.
in Arizona, is it customary to have like roundtable closings where all the parties are present?
No, that happens. I've been selling real estate for almost 20 years, and I don't know if I've ever heard of a time of that happening. I mean, it's where both parties go in whenever they go in. I mean, in the however many transactions I've had, I think I've heard of it maybe twice where buyer and seller randomly just happened to show up at the same time, but they didn't sign, they didn't sign at the same time.
So is it then, who does the title company represent?
Neutral third party, so no one.
No one. If you have okay, so then does the title company normally send the paperwork like ahead of time if you have the seller say?
So again, so that system and process. So as the listing agent, I'll make sure that I get a copy of the settlement statement before, so
Mhm.
I can review it to make sure all fees and stuff, let me rephrase that, all terms line up to the contract, and
Yeah.
then everything else is correct, and
Mhm.
then forward it to the seller, let them know, make sure they're good with it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else for us to review.
Right.
It's a waste of time. Now I will say, like 15 years ago, I did go to closings, and
Uh-huh.
I was at one closing where the lender and title company messed up on fees. But that was before we had, whatever we have now, where CDs are issued and we can
Right.
see all that stuff. So
Right.
back then, I went to a couple, but then since then I haven't. And then on the buyer side, we get a copy of the settlement statement or whatever the correct term is these days, and we
Right.
review that
It's
to
called
make sure,
something else. I forget
yeah,
too.
whatever, to make sure closing costs are correct or whatever. So there's no point for us to review it more. Like we're not going to be there. Oh, like that number is wrong. If it was wrong, then it has to be re-signed anyway.
Right. No, that makes sense. Well, I really appreciate your thoughts on this, and I'm glad you're on my side. Finally, one person.
Just us two. We got to fight the fight.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, Blair.
Yeah, and just as a side note, it's kind of a joke. What I have told people before on the listing side, if you're going to I know most listing agents don't attend the inspections for their sellers when they're representing the seller, but then are you going to attend when the post and sign gets installed? Are you going to attend the termite inspection? Like, where does the line stop
I
for
agree.
attending what you need to attend? because you can't just make the determination, I'm going to attend the closing, but not attend everything else. Like it doesn't, from a legal standpoint, you're opening up the doors way, way more than you should for legality reasons.
I agree, 100%. Well, thanks again, and I appreciate you coming on.
You got it. Have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed diving deeper into this week's topic with our real estate heavyweights. If you're interested in becoming a featured heavyweight, please reach out through our Toe to Toe podcast Facebook page.